And, Superman, of course, comes with kryptonite. So, you do what you gotta do, just in case.
Plastics.
Molded to your well-fed behinds. And all I can say is, thank God for Superman.
Welcome to episode 4 of Tony and Mike Watch the World Burn. In this episode, we're going to be covering Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. This film was released in 1985. Actually, had two directors in it, George Miller and George Ogilvy. And written by George Miller and Terry Hayes. The film had a budget of $10 million. I'm assuming this is U.S. dollars. I really don't know. And then it grossed $36 million worldwide.
I was doing some reading on this one. There's a lot of weird that goes on with this movie during pre-production because, first off, the original Mad Max film and The Road Warrior, Mad Max 2, those are both done by Kennedy and Miller. And even this one is credited to the production team of Kennedy and Miller. But Byron Kennedy was George Miller's longtime producer. It was kind of the same relationship that you had with Gary Kurtz and George Lucas. George Miller would get all the ideas together and Byron Kennedy would be like, that's stupid, or you need to fix that, or you need to flesh that out, whatever. But that that was the symbiosis that they had between the two of them. And it worked amazingly well for the first two films. But they knew they were going to be doing a sequel to Mad Max, or The Road Warrior, like not terribly long after it. And while they were scouting for locations to film this one, he was in a helicopter crash and he died. So at the very end of the film, when it says for Byron, that's who they're talking about. And that's also why we wound up with George Ogilvy being a co-director on this one. Because according to interviews with George Miller, he was just trying to get out of depression from his longtime friend dying, and he decided the best way to do that would be to just move forward with another film project, but he admits that he wasn't quite all there, so that's where George Ogilvy came in. So I think that's kind of why we get some radically different performances especially from Mel Gibson, because he does not come off like the same Max that we saw in the prior two films.
But we're kind of skipping ahead here, because we haven't even talked about the cast yet.
Oh, well, tell us about the cast, Mike.
So cast. We have Mel Gibson again as Mad Max. In this entry, we have Tina Turner as Auntie Entity, who is one of the leaders of Bartertown. Bruce Spence as Jedediah, the pilot, who you'll also remember as the gyro captain in Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. Adam Cockburn as Jedediah Jr., the pilot's son. Frank Thrig as the collector, who is the guy that kind of evaluates your trade and stuff like that for Bartertown.
The heavy gentleman.
What's that?
The heavy gentleman with the monocle. So.
Yes, that guy. Angelo Rossetto as the master, who is the guy in charge of the power plant in Bartertown. Paul Larson as Blaster, who is the muscle for Master. Angry Anderson as Ironbar Bassey, the head of security for Bartertown. Robert Grubb as the Pig Killer, who is a convict that's serving out his life sentence in the methane refinery, or the power plant in Bartertown. Helen Boudet as Savannah Nix, who is the female leader of the child survivors. Tom Jennings as Slake, who is the male leader of the child tribe. Edwin Hodgman as Dr. Dealgood, who is the chief auctioneer and the MC for Bartertown.
Whoa.
Because he's the one that called Dr. Dealgood. He's the one that makes you feel all right.
It's, he's actually probably one of the most visually memorable characters, and he maybe has 4 lines of dialogue in the whole movie, but you clearly remember him. It's like, oh yeah, that dude. So kudos to whoever did the casting.
He has a monologue for both the beginning of Thunderdome and then when he has to spin the wheel.
Well, yeah, but so, I mean, again,
but yes, they are the most memorable moments in the movie, which is funny considering you have a half-hour chase scene and it's still not as good as his monologue.
And right now, I've got two men. Two men with a gut full of fear. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
You're absolutely correct on that. See, and that's kind of thing. So, you know, we talked about how Max gets roped into this. It's all like everything that happens at the beginning of this movie. It's sheer coincidence. It's just, you know, he just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and the Jebediah, the pilot, just happened to be flying over, and they steal his vehicle and they take it to Bartertown to sell it. Mm-hmm. And Max follows him to Bartertown. And you know, again, it's odd because Max, who's never been very verbal. I mean, go back and watch The Road Warrior, and, you know, he only speaks when absolutely necessary throughout that entire film. There is no wasted dialogue in there. And this one, he's very verbal. He talks to the guy that's pedaling by with the water bike, and he pulls out his Geiger counter and you know, makes some quip about that. And then he goes in and you know, hey, that's my vehicle, you know, all that stuff. And he goes into Bartertown and tries to tell him that you know, my vehicle was stolen and I want it back. And they're like, you know, you've got something to trade or you don't. If you don't have something to trade, you need to get the hell out of here. And he's like, I've got skills to trade. So that's how he gets roped into, you know, the whole plot with Anti-Entity and all that. But
one thing I like about that scene and he's like, get rid of your weapons. You got to check weapons in here. And he keeps pulling out gun, knife, gun, bullets, gun. I mean, he's got a stack of fucking shit at the counter that he's checking in.
So, see, and this is just kind of one of those, like, in the parts of the movie where they rely on visual storytelling, like that.
Yeah.
Those are the strongest parts of the film. But I mean, some of it, I guess I should clarify that, because you watch the original Mad Max, and it's obviously it was done on a really slim budget. I mean, there was not a lot of money there, and it went on to be this massive worldwide success. And so then they actually got money and they reinvented the film, and they did The Road Warrior, and that one, you know, had a budget, but, you know, again, it was not a terribly expensive film for them to make, but you get the impression that they got to spend money on the stuff they wanted to spend money on. Yeah. Nothing about The Road Warrior looks cheap or cheated or like, you know, we had to, you know, scrimp to get this into the film. It looks exactly like it was intended to, I think. Yeah. And when you get to this one, it's all very overproduced looking. It lacks that authenticity that The Road Warrior had.
I don't know if it lacks the authenticity. I think where it doesn't hold up, though, is in the tone of it. It's much lighter fare, which you mentioned earlier, like when Max is talking, you know. So it's more audience friendly. For sure, you know, definitely going for a larger audience than what the franchise was intended. So it's kind of neutered in that respect.
Absolutely, you see that performance, and you see, you know, how he's characterizing Max and the kind of dialogue that he's throwing out there. And again, it doesn't come off genuine. It doesn't come off faithful to the Max character.
But I will agree with you, though. It seems to be an easier, more approachable character.
Yeah, he seems less ruthless.
Yes.
Because when you're watching The Road Warrior, and you know, Mad Max and The Road Warrior are rated R. They're hard R films. No two ways about it. There is nothing that they didn't feel like they couldn't put in front of the camera, because, you know, you have the car chase scene at the very beginning of the film, and you know, you have the one car that gets flipped over, and you know, the hand of the guy that's coming out of the wreckage of that, and Max is very flippant about it. He doesn't even acknowledge that somebody's dying 10 feet from him. And then he walks over to the cab of the truck and he opens the door and the body falls out on him. And while it freaked the hell out of the audience because there's this rotting body falling straight into the camera, Max is just kind of like, yeah, that's a thing. You know, it's no big deal. And then a few minutes later, you have like all the cars that are leaving the oil refinery and they're hunted down and, like, you know, flipped over. And then there's a brutal rape that's right there in your face on camera. And again, it's violent and it all feels really authentic. You don't, it's weird. It's almost like watching a documentary at that point. It's so matter of fact. It doesn't do any crazy camera angles. It's not doing like anything clever. It's just like, this is what's happening and you're going to watch it. And that's exactly how it's presented to you.
Yeah. I wonder another thing about this though too is, since they're trying to establish that in Bartertown there's some sense of civilization, you know, kind of coming back, like if that had any part of them dialing down that violence, you know, it's like, oh, you know, we're trying to be more, we got a society going here, we're trying to be more civilized, you know, we're bartering, we're trading, we're doing these types of things. I wonder if that had any factor into with them, you know, maybe dialing back some of the violence. Or what?
I don't think so, because when you go back and you watch The Road Warrior, you know, Papagallo, the leader of the guys that are defending the oil refinery from Humongous and all of his minions, he's very much like, we're still human beings with dignity. You're out there with the garbage. You know, we're still trying to build something here.
Right.
And that's the whole point of them going to, you know, getting the gasoline and getting everybody in the bus and driving up north is to rebuild civilization.
They're trying to establish a sense of civilization, so maybe that's why they're not quite as savage, you know, as, you know, again, Tina Turner is trying to build this thing up for nothing. We're straying away. Let's go with the plot, and then we can come back and dissect this fucking thing, because we're going off the rails already.
Well,
So Max sees his vehicle, and like you said, he's got nothing to trade but
his skills.
Yeah, he's a quick man, which is a throwback to the Road Warrior. So he's like, okay, we're going to introduce you to Anti-Entity, and here's the deal we're going to lay out for you.
Yeah, and at that point, you know, they all attack him, and he, you know, picks up the plate and slaps somebody in the head with it, and you know, avoids getting killed. And you know, they're like, that's the audition. They make a big deal out of, he was the first person to actually ever survive the audition. Throughout it. And then they offer him the deal that he'll get back his vehicle and his camels and whatnot if he agrees to get Master and kill Blaster. And you know, Blaster is the muscle, Master is the brain. They actually kind of demonstrate that, you know, Blaster, or I guess Master, he, as much as Anti-Entity likes to think she runs Bartertown, Master likes to humiliate her to prove that he is the power behind the throne, so to speak.
Literally the power, because he runs the power plant. He can shut the lights off, and Bartertown's effectively done. So
yeah.
Four, three, two.
For God's sake, what now?
Who run Bartertown?
Damn it, I told you no more embargoes.
Who run Bartertown?
You know who.
Say.
Master Blaster.
Say loud.
Master Blaster.
Master Blaster? What?
Master Blaster runs Bartertown.
Louder!
Master Blaster runs Bartertown.
Lift embargo.
Yeah, so they have the whole embargo thing, but so Tina Turner is humiliated, and he does it when Max is like right there. So Max kind of understands why she wants to eliminate the muscle, and so they introduce him to the idea of Thunderdome, that all you got to do is pick a fight, and it's got to be a fair fight. They make a condition of all that it has to be a fair fight. So apparently sometime Master wound up being the winning bidder, and he wound up with Max's vehicle, and Max goes out and makes a big show of, this is my vehicle.
Yeah.
And because of that, Auntie gets to step in and go, oh, there's a disagreement, so these two guys got to go to Thunderdome. And they do that, and they have this spectacular fight. It is the fight scene is by far the highlight of the film. It's actually one of the only really interesting parts of the movie, and one of the really original ideas in this movie. And I think they kind of blew their wad early on this one, because after that, Max finds out that Blaster is actually a mentally disabled kid, and he won't kill him. And comes out that, he had this deal with Anti-Entity to kill Blaster, and they, throw up their Bartertown law, which is, break a deal, face the wheel. So rather than anybody being upset that Anti-Entity basically more or less orchestrated this whole coup, to get a hold of Master and kill Blaster, apparently Blaster wasn't very liked, because I didn't see any tears when they shot him full of crossbow bolts as he was laying on the ground in Thunderdome. So I'm
sure many people are on the receiving end of Blaster.
Oh, sure.
Probably heard about it too. And plus, Anti-Entity, is very charismatic and can easily whip the mob into complete frenzy. It was absolutely nothing for her. She just jumped out. It's like, what is this? You think I don't know law? I wrote the fucking law. This man broke the fucking law. And everybody's like, bust the deal, face the wheel. I mean, like that. It is nothing. If you listen to fools, the mob rules.
Yes, well, absolutely. And Tina Turner, she gives a really solid performance.
Yes.
And she does everything she can with what's on the page. There's no two ways about that. But the problem is that there's no meat on the page. There's some charismatic dialogue. There's a couple of big monologues that she gets to get out there and kind of throw directly in your face. This is the world as it's being remade by Anti-Entity. But she lacks a lot of depth. Mm-hmm. So it's just, they never really explain her other than she's a survivor after the war, or after I think she phrased it as the day after, I believe, is the exact phrasing. So just to get back on track, so they make Max face the wheel, and they pull out this, Wheel of Fortune style contraption, and they make him spin it, and it's got like, life in prison, or you're free, or all this stuff, and it lands on Gulag.
Was there a free?
There was. I think it was acquittal. I think is what's actually on the wheel. But it's something like that.
Something like that, and it was spinning pretty fast. I couldn't read them all, but I didn't see anything that said you're free to go.
It was a really small. It's like one of the smallest of the categories that were actually on the wheel. So they take their justice kind of seriously in Bartertown. But so he gets Gulag, which you're thinking prison, because that's what a gulag is. It's a Russian word for, prison, hard labor, that kind of thing. Turns out Gulag involves them throwing Max onto a horse and putting a big clown head on him and putting some water in a jar in front of the horse and then sending it off into the desert. I don't know exactly how they got that from the word gulag or why they call it the gulag, but sure.
It just sounded cool.
It's an interesting sounding word. I'm sure, we're going to have to find out what the Russian, I don't even know what the hell you would call that. I mean, essentially they're sending him into the desert to die on the back of a horse. But the problem is they didn't tie him to the horse. He's got his hands behind his back.
Yeah, they tied his hands behind his back, but yeah, he could have just kind of fell off at any point in time if he really wanted to.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So I that's the part. This is kind of like where it starts to go off the rails in that they went for interesting visuals, but it doesn't like make any kind of sense whatsoever. So then, Max is trekking through the desert and the horse is dead and there's no water and he winds up passing out and he gets found by what's her name?
By Nix.
Anyway, by the cute girl. Which is and there's a case of mistaken identity. They drag him back to their little oasis where somehow inexplicably it's just chock full of no one older than 16 and a bunch of kids and no adults. There's no one there. So this is where the movie really jumps the tracks for me, by the way. So inexplicably there's not a single adult anywhere around. They never bother to explain there's some adults here but they got sick and they died. They're just they went off to find civilization.
Yeah, that's their reasoning. They go through the daily ritual of telling the story of how they ended up where they are at. And in the story, it's they're flying in the plane. They say it's a 747. There's a picture of a mushroom cloud, so we're assuming it's a nuclear war. The plane crashes. So lucky for them, they find the oasis. But at some point, some of the adults leave to try to find what they call Tomorrowland. I guess which is civilization. But those people never make it back. So then more people go out to try to find Tomorrowland. They don't make it back. And then the last group, I guess, tries to go out to find those people. And they never make it back. So all the adults leave. And it's just the two oldest, Nix and Slake. Is it Slake?
Slake? Is it Slake? I remember one of them is called Screw Loose or something like that. That's about it.
That's the kid that doesn't talk. So I don't know why he even got a name. I don't think they even mentioned his name. I think the reason I even know his name is because it's in the credits.
That's always the hallmark of an important character.
Yeah, Slake. So Savannah, who's the obviously the girl, and Slake, who is the guy. So the oldest of the group, which they look like, like I said, about 16, 17.
Maybe.
Around that age. So they're basically 24/7 babysitting kids ranging from 5 to about 12.
I guess, but
out there.
Some of those kids look like they're maybe 3 or 4. I mean, there's some really young faces in that crowd.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly when. I mean, they never established when the actual adults left.
No.
They never established that anybody was left behind. They never told them what it was that they were supposed to do or how they were supposed to get along. So I just got to ask, are these the dumbest adults on the planet? They're just going to leave a ton of 25 kids in the woods by themselves? We'll be back. I mean, sure, that first group was probably just a fluke. I'm sure they had no idea how to survive out there, but we've got a better idea. Oh, wait, that second group disappeared? We should get the rest of the adults together and go take a look for ourselves and find out what happened. It's just dumb. Insultingly so.
Yeah.
Then
on top of that, once they give this speech to Max, and they say, "You're Walker," and they show pictures in the, what's that called?
The Viewmaster.
The Viewmaster, yes. Do you see this? Do you remember? Tomorrow morning! See this? Remember? Mr. Walker! And they show the slide of the showgirl. You remember this? Mrs. Walker! Which always cracks me up. You got this hot-ass showgirl who they just assumes his wife.
But it's so stupid, though. I mean,
well, like again, it's storytelling, so you can communicate your what's going on to youngsters. You know,
sure, I get it. I understand why they did it the way they did it. I'm just saying that the fact if those parents, if those adults left and the oldest kids were 12, let's take a look at the numbers here. This is supposed to take place 12 or 15 years after The Road Warrior. That is confirmed in interviews with George Miller, and he co-wrote it and he directed it and produced it. So I'm going to assume he knows what he's talking about when he says it. It does take place after The Road Warrior, and that it is 12 to 15 years. That means if we looked at the youngest kid there, and let's say that youngest kid is 5 years old, who had all these kids on a plane? Number one. That's question number one.
Well, obviously, if it was 12 years after the fact, 12 to 15 years, then either Savannah and Slake were born immediately after, the year after, or they were maybe one of the few surviving children on the plane. Then everybody else was born after the fact, because what else you going to do in Oasis but fuck?
So, but, you know,
I mean, you got to rebuild civilization. You got to start somewhere.
I suppose. But I mean, here's the thing. Here's where I'm not willing to like give an inch on this one. Is they're basically saying that there were 747s that were flying while civilization was collapsing. Apparently, families were still vacationing in the outback. That's legitimately what this movie is trying to sell us. That between Mad Max and The Road Warrior, they were flying around in airplanes. I don't recall seeing a single airplane in any of the Mad Max movies before this one. And the only thing we ever saw fly before this one was the gyro, and when the gyro captain came in, people were amazed. They were freaked out. They're, oh, hey, look. And he's like, don't touch, please. It's a precision piece of equipment. If 747s were flying 1 year before that, or 2 years before that, going by their own timeline, why would anybody give a shit about the gyro?
Probably because they haven't seen anything fly in a long time. And here comes this fucking crazy doing this crazy fucking contraption. I didn't know what the fucking gyrocopter was until I saw this fucking movie.
so
Did you? Did you know what a fucking gyrocopter was until you saw that movie?
I knew what a helicopter
You're like, what the fuck is this?
Because it's so poorly established. Because this movie just kind of decided to just throw shit out there and see if anybody would notice. You know, it really kind of screws up the integrity of the Mad Max world. That's the kind of the point that I'm getting at here. Because, you know, we have 747s that were flying, and Jebediah has a plane, and he's teaching his kid how to fly it as well. And, well, okay, then what the hell's the big deal about Tomorrowland and you know, Captain Walker? Apparently pilots are a dime a dozen, you know? I mean, the movie would have been more interesting if
I would say they're not a dime a dozen because, I mean, because we can almost assume that Jebediah and the Gyro Captain are one and the same, you know? I mean, because they never really established who that person is.
Yeah, I wish they had actually.
Very strange, because on the first watch, you're like, oh, that's the fucking Gyro Captain. Oh, look, he's got a little kid. So, you know, he hooked up with the blonde in the end of Road Warrior.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
To me, it's like I would just assume that's the same character, but I guess it's not. But then again, they never say who the Gyro Captain is. But at the end of the Road Warrior, it's established that he's the first leader of the Northern Tribe.
Yeah, he's the new chief of the Great Northern Tribe. So
at some point, it's like, fuck you guys, I'm going off on my own, or is that his brother? His really retirement?
I mean, I can only assume, like, maybe it was his brother.
I don't know.
I wish they had established who he was. I wish there had been at least a little bit of exposition as that, because there is a moment in the movie where Max sees Jebediah the pilot, and he has that flash of like, "Hey, aren't you?" And it throws me off because I don't know if they're confirming he's the gyro captain, and the end of the Road Warrior is wrong, or you know, whatever, or if he's a relative of the gyro captain. So it's really sloppy.
Yeah. I'll agree with you. They nothing is super well established. They throw a few lines out there to give you just enough to keep the plot moving.
Yeah. It is almost like they're making it up as they go along. That's almost how it feels. Is they wrote this really great, you know, first act, and then they just like, well, we got to throw this in there, and we got to throw that in there, and we got to get the MTV kids in here, so we got to throw some of that shit in there, and
I wonder how much the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi affected this movie, because doesn't that kind of reek of that?
It really does. It really does, because the original Star Wars and Empire warfare is very gritty. I mean, the whole attack on Hoth, like you're seeing soldiers like get shot at and blown up and blown out of the sky, and it's there's a real authenticness to the violence in those films and the consequences of a big battle like that. With Return of the Jedi, it's just fucking teddy bears, like, you know, they just happen to have set up all these booby traps that are made to take out ATSTs for no reason, but they never bothered to use them until now.
Yeah, you know? and there's zero stakes in that scene. You see one Ewok die, one. And hundreds of Imperial troopers get their ass kicked.
And not only do you only see one, when that one Ewok does die, they do that whole, the other Ewok comes over and leans over him and starts crying. It's like, what the hell did you imagine was going to happen? You're like using vines for tripwires for ATSTs and being drugged behind them, but this surprises you that an Ewok died. Come on. You know, and these are the same characters that a few scenes earlier were going to eat Han and Leia and Chewie. You know, they were ready to cook them. So I'm sorry, but you're absolutely right. It definitely has that stink of, it worked in Return of the Jedi, we should try it here too. So just to finish wrapping up the plot here. So the kids go out into the desert, and Max goes out to save them, and they wind up closer to Bartertown than they should, and they realize that Master has been thrown in with the pigs, and so Max is going to get in there, and I don't know, he's going to steal Master for some reason.
Well, I'm assuming he kind of took pity on him, because they were throwing him down in with the pigs. I guess to get him to try to fix shit because he refused to fix the stuff. Again, this is a kinder, gentler Max. So he gets in there and he saves him, and then.
Well, the how he saves him part is like one of the big bullshit moments of the movie, because apparently they've built this giant train that goes out to the middle of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. They never actually say where those train tracks end.
No.
You know, all we know is that it's this weird car train thing that's already been set up. And you know, so they get the kids and they get Master and they throw everybody on this train and they hightail it out of there.
Well, the pig killer drives the thing out of there, which how does he know even how to drive the damn thing?
That's a great question. But even more than that is, you know, it's on tracks. Mm-hmm. The bad guys, Auntie and her minions, know where this thing goes, and it's not like it'd be really tough to follow them. Why bother with the high-speed pursuit at all? Just follow the train tracks. You don't have to.
It's not a high speed of a pursuit because Iron Bar follows them in a fucking handcart.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. Exactly. I forgot how stupid that was.
This is my biggest beef with the movie, and I'm sure you'll probably agree. Is that whole chase scene is a Looney Tunes chase scene. It is totally fucking laughs. There are zero stakes in it. I do not believe for a second that anybody dies. Because I'm not thinking none of the bad guys even fucking die.
No. When there's a like explosion on the front of the train car, like Iron Bar pops up and he's got like black powder, soot all over him, and it is exactly like a Looney Tunes cartoon, and it is just so cheesy and dumb.
And here's the other thing. Going back to Iron Bar, there's a spot where he's hanging off the train cart thing, and he's like lifting his legs up to miss the little stations on the bridge. So he's lifting his legs up constantly over and over, and then finally he hits something, just like in a cartoon, falls off, but yet magically later he appears back on somebody else's vehicle. How the fuck did that happen?
I got nothing for you. See, and this is the part of the movie that I find like absolutely the most offensive. It's the nail in the coffin for me, because you watch The Road Warrior and that whole chase sequence, there is so much going on. There are real consequences there. You think that the rig has the gas, and the gas is the last hope for these people that are trying to escape and get out of the wasteland. And you have the cart in the back of the trailer, and it gets ripped off, and you see those guys die. And then you see the warrior woman who's on top of the rig, and the mechanic whose legs don't work. She gets shot and falls into the barbed wire, and he tries to reach down to save her, and they both get pulled off of the top of the trailer, and they both die. And so even Papagallo gets this giant metal weapon hurled at him, and it stabs him in the back, and he just falls over dead and veers off onto the side of the road. There's real consequences to that. The good guys don't win, and they're certainly not unscathed. And then when it all is said and done, after you have seen people set on fire and people shot, and somebody gets their hand stuck in a wheel and ripped underneath the semi-truck, but again, everything has stakes. Everything has consequences. You have the whole bit with the shotgun shells. I mean, think about the climax of the movie. It is literally Max trying to drive a rig with a swollen shut eye, hanging on to a little kid who he has climbing out on the front of a rig to get a bullet. And then Wes pops up, and they drive into the Humongous' car. It is absolutely magnificently executed. So and then the truck falls over, and Max finds out, finally, after all that, after everything that they went through, that he was just the decoy. That there is no gas in the truck, that it's filled with dirt. It's so beautifully handled. And the only 3 survivors of that whole thing are Max, the gyro captain, and the feral kid. Yeah. That's it. Did anybody die at the end of the Thunderdome chase scene? Was anybody more than hurt?
The only person that actually dies in this movie that we can confirm is Blaster. That's the only confirmed death in this whole.
You're right. I was gonna say it's Blaster and the horse. So.
No, wait. I'm sorry. One of the kids does get swallowed up by the desert. As Max goes after him, he saves everyone but one. I forgot what the character's name was, but he didn't make it.
The sinkhole, yeah.
So two confirmed deaths in the whole movie, whereas in Road Warrior, there's at least 50 motherfuckers that die.
Everything about this feels like they compromised their vision to get a PG-13 because they were promised big box office.
Like you said, there's 2 writers in it and 2 directors, and like you said, Miller probably didn't have his whole heart into this one. So
I think you're right.
It makes you wonder how much of it was actually directed by the other guy and not Miller. Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I do know Terry Hayes wrote the screenplays for the first 2 Mad Max films, so he knows the lore because he created a good chunk of it, I'm sure. But Ogilvy apparently is a big character director. He's not an action sequence guy, and I think the way that I think it was originally sold was that Miller directed all the big action sequences and Ogilvy did all the character stuff. Well, that kind of tracks with the fact that Max doesn't feel like Max. This feels like somebody else's interpretation of Max. Yeah. And that's almost exactly how this, that's what it sounds like. That's kind of what it feels like when you're watching it too. Anti-Entity's character is really interesting, but there's no meat on those bones. I mean, at the end of this big chase where, the Master and the kids get away in the plane with Jebediah the pilot and his kid, Max has jumped out of the plane so that they can make their escape because they need to lighten the load. And Tina Turner pulls up, and does she arrest him? No. Does she offer him a job? No. She goes, "Oh, Raggedy Man, aren't we the pair?" And then she turns around and goes home. It makes no sense. It's completely unsatisfying. Yeah. And then you have your little, epilogue where it turns out that the kids went to what I'm assuming is Sydney, and they set up civilization there. They never say what happened to the kids that were left back at the Oasis.
That always bothered the fuck out of me too. It's like, did you go back and get those motherfuckers, or are they still there? Because they do their same shtick at the end. They tell their story so you know how they got there. And we have the lights on so people help find their way home and all that shit. So I'm assuming they're still fucking there because they don't show Slake. They just show Savannah.
Yeah. Does this mean that Slake grew up to be a Morton Joe?
Could be a theory. I don't know. But yeah, that part kind of bothered me. But I did like that ending though, and I thought it was kind of. Let me rephrase. I like that portion of the ending where it looks like you got people rebuilding civilization and stuff like that. So as far as an end to the trilogy, while it's not the greatest thing in the world, it leaves you with some hope that humanity will go on and maybe prosper later or something. Who knows? I don't know.
But just to get into the nitty gritty of this film, you really look at it, there's so much stuff that's just so poorly handled, poorly done, unimaginatively done, I guess is the whole thing. And I guess here's what bothers me.
Movie.
Do what?
What's the runtime on this?
I want to say it comes in at 2 hours.
Is it?
I want to say it's 2 hours and 3 minutes.
It almost seems like it's kind of condensed in a way, because like you said, there's a lot of great stuff in there, but and I agree with you, none of it is developed enough to be very satisfying. So I wonder how much of it got chopped off just to make a certain runtime.
See, I'm of the other opinion. I actually think this one feels kind of padded out. It feels like they had 3 chunks that they knew were going to be in the film. They knew that they were going to do the Bartertown thing at the very beginning, all the way up to Thunderdome. They knew that they were going to have the kid thing, and that segment of the film feels really long to me. It just, there's all these shots of the kids and the one with the black eye makeup eating with his monkey or whatever it was. And it's all these really dumb shots that are just stuck in there. And I guess it's supposed to make me sympathetic to these kids. Oh, see how meager it is. I'm thinking, you are surrounded by plants, you have fresh water, you have food. You got nothing to complain about. Yeah. Bartertown is a shithole, and this place probably smells a whole lot better. so you got that. And then you have the chase scene. And again, it's almost like the chase scene is played for laughs.
It is.
Nothing about it is thought out. They're like I said, they're on train tracks. There's no veering off. There's no escaping that. It would have been more interesting if they had set the train up and let's say Max had sent the kids out in a different vehicle. He gets his truck back and the camels, and he throws the kids in there with Master and sends them off into the desert, and he gets on the train, and one of the kids stays with him because they want to they want to be like Max, and he's barreling through the desert, and he knows that they're going to catch him because there's nowhere for him to go. He can't steer left or right. He's on the tracks. And when they actually get to him and they capture him and they realize, nope, Master is gone. Oops, we screwed up. It kind of echoes the Road Warrior a little bit in that, ending, but this time Max is in on it as opposed to one being fooled by it. Number 2, that whole, there's no consequences to what's going on in any of that. And there's no consequences to anything in this film at all. You never feel like Max is in danger. In the Road Warrior,
you do Thunderdome, because it gets he gets his ass kicked a little bit in that part of it. So I feel the tension in that part of the movie, but after that, like after he's rescued, there's zero tension from the time they get into Bartertown and that whole chase scene. Yeah, there's zero stakes.
Yeah,
you can't take it seriously when Iron Bar's on a fucking handcart chasing down the train. You can't. It's so ridiculous. It's just no.
So, I mean, from a production design standpoint, it's all there. It's all good. Visually, it's a beautiful film. And they've really like amped up the aesthetic because at the end of the Road Warrior, everybody looks like they were, whatever they could find to wear, that's what they were wearing. The gyro captain has, long underwear and a trench coat and a pilot's thing, and he's got a little flower in his coat even. And it's charming in that regard. Everybody else is like, they can't find body armor, so they're wearing football pads and hockey pads. It makes sense. It stands up to scrutiny of like, well, if you have to protect yourself and you have people that are trying to beat you to death with a barbed wire wrapped baseball bat, that's what you put on.
Yeah.
This one, they actually take it to the point to where, yeah, this is just how people dress, but now they're starting to like get aesthetic with it. So you have Iron Bar, he's got that doll head that sticks up behind him, and you have the guy that has the giant mohawk with the feathers all woven into it that Max shoots off of his head at the beginning. So the look of all of this stuff is great. It's fascinating. Whoever did the production design on this, they did a wonderful job at showing that same world 10 years later.
It looks like it belongs. Everything looks like it belongs in the Mad Max universe. It's just the tone doesn't belong in the Mad Max universe.
You're absolutely correct. And I think that's like the reason, like, I'll watch Mad Max and I love that movie. I love everything about it. And I know that it's kind of a weird, uneven film, but I still adore everything about it because it feels authentic. And then I watched a Road Warrior and I'm like, oh, this movie is the bomb. And then I watched those two and I'm like, oh, how bad could Mad Max be? I know I don't like the movie, but maybe I should give it another chance. And every time I give this movie another chance, I come away going, no, I was right. This movie sucks. It's really, it's not a good movie. There's no escaping that fact. And so,
it's going to be blasphemous. I don't know if it's actually the worst entry. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't really care for Fury Road.
See, I think the Fury Road is exactly what Thunderdome should have been or wanted to be. Because, well, I realize, I know you're like, you get tired of it because it just feels like it's one long chase scene throughout.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, it is one long chase scene. Yes, you're right in that regard. But it's an evolving chase scene. And the stakes change constantly throughout that. And all of the action sequences that happen in that chase scene are basically informing you on the characters and what's really going on and who Immortan Joe is and all this wonderful stuff. It's doing something that's really difficult to do, which is it's doing action. It's doing really big set piece action. They really built those cars. They really drove them through the desert. It's not CG. It's not green screen. It's no bullshit. I mean, those vehicles do exist. But at the same time, there's real tension there. There are real stakes there. There are several times where you're like, hey, not everybody's going to make this one.
Are there really real stakes? One person dies.
In Fury Road?
In Fury Road, one of the girls dies. That's it. Okay, now I remember, and the war boy dies. Not too many people actually die in there. See, that's the thing. They try to capture the greatness of the Road Warrior chasing at the end, but each time they do it, they fail. The first time they fail because it's cartoonish. The second time they fail is because it's just a truck they're chasing. That's it. There's no supporting vehicles or nothing like that, so there's no opportunity for anybody else to really die for there to be any real stakes. Yeah, no, it's a fail for me, man. I can't get behind it.
I love Fury Road. I was gonna say I think that Tom Hardy was the perfect replacement for Max.
I agree with you.
And I know that there's a theory out there that actually Tom Hardy is not actually Max, that he's actually the feral kid who grew up and wanted to be like Max. And I kind of love that theory because it kind of ties everything together and gets rid of any continuity issues between the Mad Max films. I'm not saying that that's the case, but
I want to chime on that one real quick because I don't think that's the case either. I think Max is more of a folk hero. I don't think he's a man that actually exists. I think he's a vehicle to tell stories. And it's just so happens to be the character like the man with no name in the Clint Eastwood movies.
The challenger, direct from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's the man with no name.
You know, he's just a guy. And again, when you what the fuck? In The Road Warrior, the story is told from the feral kid's perspective when he's older.
Yes.
As the leader of the tribe. And then you have the kids that tell their stories.
And Thunderdome, yeah.
Yeah, and Thunderdome. So, and each time he's left behind, so you don't really know what happens to him until the next movie. And the same thing happens at the end of Fury Road. You know, he helps Furiosa, get rid of Immortan Joe, and she becomes the leader of that group then. And then Max just walks off in the crowd and just disappears.
Well, I was going to say Fury Road is actually a story told from Furiosa's point of view. And it doesn't have...
And again, where Max is not really the main character, he's really more of supporting the people in the movie. He helps out the people at the refinery, and then he helps out the kids, and then he helps out the what do they call them, the maidens or the wives of Immortan Joe?
I remember it's the War Boys and
I think it's called the wives of the brides or something stupid.
Yeah, brides. I believe it's the brides, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I'm not positive on that one, but I think it was the brides of Immortan Joe.
Yeah. So I picture Max as more as a mythological hero in that universe as opposed to an actual character. Maybe in the first movie he's a real person, and then they just take that guy and just plug him into whatever story they're telling or whatever narrative fits.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think that he is. The first movie is most definitely that's Max's story. That's all real. That's all concrete. The second movie, Max. I think Max is a real person, and I think you're getting Max's story as told by other people. But it doesn't mean that it's not really Max. The only thing I can think of is at the beginning of Fury Road. That's Max narrating what's going on. And the other thing about it, because he has that whole monologue at the very beginning where he's standing outside of the car and he eats the lizard and then the bad guys come after him at the very beginning of the film. But he has a little monologue right there, and it's the only movie that actually opens with Max monologuing at all. So I think that most
definitely... I'll watch that back because I don't remember that.
He does monologue, but then Max is also haunted by apparently there was a little girl or a family, something that he failed to save, and it's eating away at him throughout all of Fury Road. That's the first time that's actually happened to Max. So he's actually a bit of a tortured soul in Fury Road. So I think because Max's story after the first film is being told from different perspectives, like you pointed out, I think that they don't know everything about Max. That's kind of why the story changes a little bit, because they're telling Max's story, but they didn't know Max had a wife and a kid. They didn't know that Max used to be a cop. Max just showed up. We found him in the desert one day, and we brought him back to the Oasis, and he looked an awful lot like this really crappy drawing of Captain Walker that somebody had drawn up on the wall over there, so we assumed that must be the guy. I'm just going to say that, as far as I'm concerned, you can watch Mad Max, you can watch The Road Warrior, and you can skip straight to Fury Road, and you have not missed anything, because Thunderdome, it's the only Mad Max film that does not hold up to scrutiny. If you really look at that movie and you really look at the story and the construction of it, it doesn't. It's the only one that falls apart. But yeah, no, just Thunderdome is a complete waste of time.
I would say this. I would go so far as say just watch Mad Max and watch The Road Warrior, and then that's it.
I think you're being unnecessarily harsh.
I mean, if you're gonna, if you're a completist, go ahead and watch them all. If you just really want the good stuff, for me, just watch the first two.
Fury Road has some great stuff in it, and I don't think you should you skip that one at your own peril.
So just to give my final thoughts about this movie, it's not the greatest. It's not the worst thing in the world. It is definitely a neutered version of the universe. So in that regard, it sticks out. I think if they would have either cut out the children in this one, or if they would have had spent more time on developing all the characters, because like I said earlier, every character is interesting. They just don't have enough, like you said, enough meat on their bones to flesh everything out. I think if they would flesh everything out and amped up the grit to where it's supposed to be in this universe, it would have been a great entry. But due to the deficiencies, due to the fact that it is neutered, there was no real character development. I mean, does anybody even really have an arc in this movie at all? Does anybody learn or grow or change?
Other than the one group of kids leaving the Oasis and going to Tomorrowland, everybody is exactly the same.
Yeah.
At the beginning as they are at the end, with the exception of Blaster because he's dead.
Right. And I guess maybe Master, since he's not since he got dethroned, he got humbled. But even then, I mean, they don't spend enough time with the characters to really show any real growth or development or something like that. So
they also don't show that Blaster or that Master wound up like helping the kids or stayed there and started helping them rebuild.
Yeah.
They could have shown him in that last scene where she's doing her narration. It would have been nice to actually know that, he got out of Bartertown and he wanted to build a new world, and this time he was going to do it right, and he was going to do it with a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, there's so much wasted potential here, and it's such a disappointment. And every time that I get on my Mad Max train, this is the last station. This is where the train stops.
So I mean, here's the big lesson for you kiddies. Be rated R when it's supposed to be rated R. When that universe, that established universe, needs it. Mad Max definitely needs a rated R. It needs that level of grit for it to work. But don't do rated R just because that's the thing to do at the time, where dark and gritty is the thing to fucking do, because that shit don't fucking work. Take the rated R out of fucking superhero movies, unless it's Wolverine, who is a killer. That's appropriate. I don't want my rated R in my Superman movie. Get that fucking shit out of there. It doesn't belong. Superman does not need 5 hours of fucking violence. He doesn't need to be a moody bitch. That's not his character. I don't care what the New 52 says. You can fucking suck it. Christopher Reeve is my Superman. my virtuous paragon of good.
That's harsh, man. That's harsh. Unnecessarily so. But but no, another movie franchise that suffers from the exact same problem was Die Hard. Because the first two Die Hard films were hard R, but they were gritty, and he was a cop, and he had to shoot bad guys, and when he shot bad guys, they were fucking shot. There was no like, oh, he winged them, and they're asleep. They'll wake up later with handcuffs. It'll be fine. So after like the second Die Hard movie, I completely didn't care about John McClane. And I know that there are other Die Hard movies that are really, well appreciated, and I can't stand them because they lost that grit. That first Die Hard movie is a masterpiece. The second Die Hard movie, pretty solid. Mm-hmm. Everything after that, the minute they're like, well, we got to get the teenagers in here. We got to shoot for PG-13. They let you say the F word one time in PG-13. Anyway, so Mike is picking our next movie. Our next movie is going to be?
The next movie is going to be The Color of Money. And we will show you why Paul Newman is the greatest lovable scumbag actor out there, period.
So you're saying he just plays the same role in every movie that he's in?
Just about.
So anyway, join us next time on Tony and Mike Watch the World Burn. Peace!
See you next time.